Hey there. Ready for a deep dive into rural wash? We're about to explore why simply building wells and toilets just isn't enough, and how understanding the whole system is really the key to making a real impact.
You got it.
Our guide for this deep dive, a fascinating paper by Kate Neely and Nicholas Valcourt.
That's right. Review of systems thinking in rural wash programming and research.
We'll uncover why that engineering approach alone falls short, how the sector's evolved its thinking, and we'll even look at some of the tools being used.
Both qualitative and quantitative. You might be surprised.
Get ready for some aha moments. I know I had a few preparing for this. So let's start with a pretty stark fact. Billions of people still lack access to safe water and sanitation.
Billions. Despite decades of effort.
Makes you wonder, what are we missing?
Well, that's exactly what Neely and Valcourt dig into. The number of broken abandoned water systems across the developing world is a huge red flag.
Right. It's like focusing only on infrastructure just doesn't cut it.
It doesn't. And the paper even mentions communities repurposing galvanized pipes meant for water systems.
As clotheslines.
Yeah. Imagine that, spending millions on water infrastructure.
And it becomes a clothesline.
It really shows how real-world situations don't always go according to plan.
Yeah. So why does this happen?
The answer lies in understanding that wash isn't isolated. It's embedded in what's called a complex adaptive system.
Complex adaptive system. That sounds a bit intimidating. What does that even mean when we're talking about wash?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. Think about it. The success of a wash project hinges not just on the physical stuff.
But on a bunch of interconnected factors.
Exactly. Like community behavior, local governance, economics, even cultural beliefs.
So it's not enough to just make sure the well works.
Nope. You need to consider the community's hygiene practices, power structures, their economic situation. It's a puzzle where every piece counts.
Okay, like a puzzle. I like that.
Yeah.
So as a development worker, you can't just focus on the technical side.
Right. You need to grasp the whole picture.
And that's why we saw a shift towards community participation in the early 2000s, right?
Exactly. Things like community-led total sanitation, or CLTS, emphasizing the importance of getting people involved from day one.
People are more likely to use and maintain toilets if they've been part of the process from the beginning. But even with that shift, the sector started realizing something else.
That for truly sustainable solutions, you got to look beyond the immediate community.
So we need to think even bigger.
We need to think about policies, power dynamics, market forces, the entire enabling environment.
So we've gone from let's build stuff to let's understand the entire system and make it work for everyone. But systems thinking, that's not just some abstract concept, is it?
Not at all. It offers a diverse set of approaches and techniques, a whole toolbox.
And there's a tool for every need.
From simple checklists to complex computer models.
That makes sense. Not every situation needs a super in-depth analysis. Sometimes a simple practical tool is enough.
Right, like if you need to quickly assess the sustainability of a water system.
Then something like Water for People's checklist could be a good starting point.
Absolutely. Things like the WashH Sustainability Index tool and the World Bank's Sustainability Assessment Model are also great examples.
They help you pinpoint potential weak spots in the system so you can target interventions more effectively.
But what if you need a deeper dive into what's happening within the community?
Then maybe something like participatory action research, or PAR, would be a better fit.
Exactly. Remember that example from the paper about PAR being used to understand the transition of water services in Uganda?
Yeah, involving the community and the research itself seems like a powerful way to make sure solutions actually meet their needs.
Absolutely. And then there's social network analysis.
Social network analysis? That sounds complex.
It's simpler than it sounds. It's basically mapping out who influences whom in a system.
So you can see how information flows or why certain groups might be left out of decision-making.
Exactly. The paper even highlighted how some NGOs unintentionally hinder communication between people and their government.
Fascinating. And for those who like to crunch numbers, we've got system dynamics modeling, right?
That's right, using computer simulations to test out different interventions.
Yeah.
It's more high-tech, but can help make strategic decisions.
Like figuring out how to best spend money on maintaining those boreholes in East Africa.
Precisely.
So many different tools. But before we get too carried away, we need to remember context matters. Each wash situation is unique, right?
Absolutely. It's tempting to think what worked somewhere will automatically work everywhere else, but that can backfire.
You can't just plug and play solutions.
Nope. Every context is shaped by its history, culture, power structures, environmental factors.
It's tempting to just take a solution that worked somewhere else and just try to plug it in, but that can backfire.
Exactly. What might work in one place could be a disaster in another.
Neely and Valcourt talk about path dependence and coevolution, which, to be honest, sound a bit academic.
They're actually quite straightforward, though. Path dependence basically means that the current state of a system is a product of its past decisions made years ago. Even historical events influence how things work today.
Interesting. So history really matters.
It does. And coevolution emphasizes how different systems like water management and agriculture are constantly interacting and shaping each other.
So it's all connected. Water, agriculture, health, they all impact one another.
Exactly. It's an interconnected web.
It seems like understanding that historical context is crucial when designing solutions.
Absolutely. And that's why engaging with communities and understanding their specific needs is so important.
So we've talked about tools and the importance of context, but WASH is about more than just water and sanitation, isn't it? I mean, think about how water use in your own home is shaped by everyone who lives there.
It's a great analogy. Now expand that to a whole community.
Right. It becomes much more complex.
WASH intersects with so many areas. Health education, agriculture, gender equality, disaster preparedness. You name it.
Even disaster preparedness. That's interesting. How so?
Well, imagine a community relying on a single water source that gets contaminated after a flood.
Oh, right.
Suddenly, the lack of good sanitation becomes a major public health crisis.
It all comes back to that interconnectedness. I was reading about a study mentioned in the paper that really stuck with me, the link between malnutrition and water quality.
Ah, yes, the one that found just providing filtration systems wasn't enough to combat malnutrition.
Right. You also need to chlorinate the water to prevent diarrhea, which can worsen malnutrition in children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It highlights the need for collaboration and a holistic systems-level approach.
It's like trying to untangle a giant knot of interconnected issues.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And it shows why effective WASH work requires a lot more than we might think.
So much more. It's not just about building wells. It's about understanding the whole system and finding solutions that work for everyone.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground already. Let's take a pause here. When we come back, we'll explore some of the specific challenges and opportunities of applying a systems approach to WASH.
Welcome back. Let's get into some of the nuts and bolts of applying systems thinking to WASH. One challenge that jumps out is data.
Data. It seems like everyone's obsessed with data these days. But in rural areas, isn't reliable data for WASH hard to come by?
It's a major hurdle. For systems thinking to really work, we need good data on so many things. Water quality, sanitation coverage, hygiene practices,
Okay.
and then socioeconomic data governance indicators, environmental factors. It's a lot.
It's not just counting toilets and water points, then.
Nope. You need a deep understanding of the whole system. And in many rural communities, data collection is weak or non-existent.
Making it tough to get a clear picture and track progress.
Exactly. And even when data exists, it's often scattered across different organizations or government departments.
So it's a jigsaw puzzle just to assemble the basic facts.
It can be. Data sharing and coordination are crucial, but there are logistical, political, even cultural barriers.
Okay, so data is a big bottleneck. Let's say we magically solve that. What other challenges are out there?
Well, stakeholder engagement is another big one. Systems thinking emphasizes that interconnectedness we've been talking about.
Right. It's not just engineers and development workers anymore. Exactly. You've got communities, local governments, businesses, NGOs. Everyone has a stake in this.
And I imagine they don't always agree.
You've got it. Bringing all those stakeholders together, getting them talking, building consensus around common goals. That can be a huge task.
I bet you'd have conflicting priorities, power imbalances, communication issues, maybe even mistrust between groups. How do you even start to navigate that?
It takes serious facilitation skills, cultural sensitivity, and a willingness to really hear different perspectives.
So it's not just about technical knowledge. You need to be a diplomat, too.
Absolutely. Systems thinking pushes us to be more than just engineers or public health specialists. It's about being diplomats, negotiators, community organizers.
A whole new way of thinking about development.
Exactly.
All this talk about challenges can be a bit daunting, but there must be opportunities too. Every coin has two sides.
Of course. The challenges themselves point to exciting opportunities. For example, needing better data could actually strengthen local monitoring systems.
So communities could track their own progress instead of relying on outside experts. Exactly. And that need for stakeholder engagement, it could lead to solutions that are truly collaborative and locally driven.
Communities working with governments and NGOs to identify problems and design solutions that fit their needs. That's powerful.
It shifts us away from that top-down, we-know-best approach towards something more participatory and empowering.
Much more in line with systems thinking. And we can't forget about technology, right? Big data, machine learning, all those fancy tools.
Absolutely. They have huge potential. Even with data scarcity, these technologies can help us make better use of what we do have.
So even though data scarcity is a challenge, could tech help us make better use of the limited data we have?
Definitely think of machine learning. It can help spot patterns and trends in complex data sets that traditional analysis might miss.
And with all the remote sensing data, satellite imagery, mobile phone data, we might be able to learn about wash conditions in remote areas without even going there.
Exactly. Technology can't replace on-the-ground work and community involvement, but it can make our systems thinking efforts much stronger.
So there's a lot to be optimistic about, despite the challenges. Are there any real-world examples of systems thinking working in rural wash? A success story.
Definitely Water for People's work in Rwanda and Bolivia is a great example. They have this everyone forever model.
Everyone forever.
Yeah. The goal is universal and sustainable wash services in a defined area.
So it's about long-term impact, not just reaching as many people as possible.
Exactly. And they're using a systems approach to get there. They work with local governments to build capacity to deliver wash services, and they invest heavily in community engagement and behavior change.
Addressing multiple parts of the system at the same time. That makes sense.
And they're seeing results. In some districts, they've achieved near universal access to safe water and sanitation with signs that it's truly sustainable.
That's encouraging. It shows that a systems approach can make a real difference in people's lives. But it also sounds like a marathon, not a sprint.
You got it. Systems change takes time, patience, persistence, and a willingness to adapt.
Speaking of long-term change, what's the role of research in all this? How can research help push systems thinking in WASH forward?
That's a crucial question.
Yeah.
We need research that goes beyond just evaluating single interventions. We need to understand the whole system.
So instead of, did this well improve health, we need to be asking, how do all these parts of the system interact and influence each other?
Exactly. We need research to help us untangle those complex dynamics, find the leverage points for change, develop tools and approaches that are context-specific and scalable.
It's about seeing the whole forest, not just individual trees.
Exactly. And this research can't just stay in universities. It needs to involve practitioners, policymakers, and communities.
Everyone needs a voice.
Right? We need to bridge the gap between research and practice, make sure findings are translated into real-world action. It's about making research useful.
So fostering a culture of learning and collaboration where everyone involved in WASH, from researchers to community members, is learning and adapting.
Exactly. A community of practice where everyone shares their knowledge and experiences.
I love that. The more we understand these complex systems, the better equipped we are to design interventions that really work.
Interventions that are effective, equitable, and sustainable. It's a journey, but one worth taking.
I'm feeling inspired. We've covered a lot of ground. Let's take a quick pause and come back to wrap up our deep dive into systems thinking and rural WASH. Okay, we're back for our final look at systems thinking and rural WASH. You know, as we've been talking, I keep thinking about everyone listening out there.
It's always good to think about the audience.
Right, because you might be a development worker or a policymaker, or maybe you're just someone who cares about these issues and wants to make a difference. So what does all this mean for you? What are the key takeaways?
If there's one thing to remember, it's this: stop thinking about WASH as just wells and toilets. It's way bigger than that.
Yeah, ditch that old problem solution done idea. It just doesn't work like that.
Exactly. Because as we've seen, those quick fixes often create a whole new set of problems down the road. If you don't consider the whole system.
And end up playing whack-a-mole.
Exactly. Addressing symptoms instead of root causes.
So takeaway number one, embrace the complexity. WASH is tied to everything: health, education, economics, gender equality, you name it.
And that means understanding the context is crucial. What works in one place might flop in another.
Even well-intentioned solutions can backfire.
They can. We need to be humble and acknowledge that we don't have all the answers.
Which brings us to takeaway number two. There's no magic bullet, no one-size-fits-all solution.
Wouldn't it be nice if there was? But the world is messy and complex, and WASH is no exception.
I hear you, but you know what? I actually find that kind of empowering.
Me too, because it means the best solutions often come from the communities themselves, from the people who live there.
They understand the nuances of their own context better than anyone.
They're the experts. We need to listen to them.
So takeaway number three, engage, engage, engage. Talk to the people, listen to their needs, really understand their priorities.
Don't just parachute in with your own ideas.
Don't just engage at the beginning either. Make it an ongoing thing. Systems change over time, and you need to adapt. Be open to feedback. Be willing to change course.
Right, it's a continuous process.
Which leads us to takeaway number 4, be willing to experiment, to learn, and to change direction along the way. We won't always get it right the first time.
And don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
It's part of the process, as long as you learn from those mistakes and share what you learned with others.
Failure can be the best teacher.
It often is.
Okay, we've talked about complexity, silver bullets, community engagement, but I bet some people are thinking, this is great, but what can I as an individual really do?
That's a fair question. But here's the thing. Systems change doesn't always require these huge top-down initiatives. Sometimes small changes in how we think or act can make a big difference.
Our individual actions can have a ripple effect.
They can never underestimate your own power.
So what's a good first step? Where do you even begin?
Start by asking questions. When you're facing a wash challenge, don't jump to solutions. Ask yourself, what's really going on here? What are the root causes? Who are the key players? Who am I missing?
Who are we missing? Whose voices aren't being heard? It's so easy to overlook certain perspectives.
Especially those who are marginalized or excluded. And often those unheard voices are the ones who hold the key to sustainable solutions.
It's about making sure everyone has a seat at the table.
Exactly.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've only scratched the surface, but I think we've touched on some really crucial points.
I agree. Systems thinking is a vast and complex field, but I hope this deep dive has given you a good starting point, a new way to think about washes.
It definitely has for me, and I hope it's inspired you to take action. Even small steps can make a big difference.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought from the paper. Neely and Valcourt ask, what are the biggest obstacles to applying a systems approach in your own work? And what's the first step to overcome them? Something to think about.
I love that question. We've given you a lot to digest, so take some time to reflect on it and think about how you can put these ideas into practice.
And remember, we're all in this together.
Exactly. Keep learning, keep questioning, keep pushing for change.
Let's create a more sustainable future for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into systems thinking in rural Watch and Horse. We'll see you next time.